Castro, Little Havana, classic automobiles, Roman cigars, and Ricky Ricardo are some of the many thoughts, sounds, and images that come into the minds of many Americans when they hear the word Cuba. However, Cuba is a country with a lot of history and many valuable resources. According to Clifford's statement, the Cuban economy depended on the export of agricultural products, and sugar continued to dominate the economy of Cuba as it has since the late 1800s. Staten also says the popular saying, "without sugar, no country," indicated the importance of sugar in Cuba during its early history. Through the early 20th century, Cuba had become economically dependent on the United States, and its dependence began to grow over time until Castro took over the government, which eventually led to the United States embargo on Cuba. Its current economy is a planned economy, which means that the Cuban government oversees it. The country's central planned economy is a barrier to the free flow of international trade and investment. Despite the economic challenges Cubans face, they are generally better off than many other developing countries.
Afro-Cuban refers to Cubans who have African ancestry, apparent black phenotype, and/or elements of cultural or historical characteristics linked to Africa and/or African culture. Racial consciousness, according to a tour guide in Cuba, became apparent before and after Fidel Castro's revolution. Prior to Fidel, black Cubans were highly discriminated against. Post-revolution, blackness was redefined, and black Cubans were less discriminated against and given opportunities in education, given medical and housing, but still not treated equally. Fidel Castro's first public address on racism after his rise to power was on March 23, 1959, at a labor rally in Havana. Less than 3 months after he defeated Fulgencio Batista, he is quoted saying, "One of the most just battles that must be fought, a battle that must be emphasized more and more, which I might call the fourth battle, the battle to end racial discrimination at work centers." Although Castro issued anti-discrimination laws, there is a generational interpretation of discrimination in Cuba. The older generation feels as though there is no discrimination, but the new generation of black Cubans are questioning the institutional racism that exists. The tour guide not only discussed his experiences as a young black Cuban, but he emphasizes the class gap between wealthy white Cubans and Afro-Cubans, redefining wealth not so much as monetary gain, but as a class of Cubans who will inherit wealth, land, housing, and education. The Cuban labor force has a history of being occupied by Afro-Cubans and manual labor. This manual labor includes cane harvesters, fruit and vegetable pickers, and or other jobs that include unskilled or semi-skilled workers. The tour guide not only emphasized that racial harmony does not exist in Cuba, but the systemic racism is perpetuated in systems of labor that exude racial hierarchies. Although discrimination exists in Cuba, it comes in a different form from the U.S. Afro-Cuban culture is acknowledged and continues to play a vital role in the identity of Cuba. It was definitely the Cuban Revolution that opened up a space for extended research of African ethnic roots and the creation of Cubanidad. And yes, Cubanidad is geared towards a united racial makeup, including the mulatto, the negro, and the blanco, but young black Cubans still feel marginalized.
People are very important to a community. In order for a particular neighborhood or area to succeed, community must exist. There must be people who are willing to support local businesses, socialize in groups to spread ideas and knowledge, and rally around local leaders. According to Clifford Staten, Cubans are passionate, gregarious, resourceful, hardworking, and full of life. With Cuba being an urban society, there are many important activities that occur that are critical for people, specifically planners, to examine. Specifically, Staten says, life in larger cities, like Havana, tend to revolve around the porches, balconies, and verandas of the houses or apartment-style living spaces. Kids, dogs, and cats often play in these areas while clothes are hanging on the line drying. In the evenings, adults tend to sit on their verandas and balconies and take advantage of the cooler temperatures. Neighbors chat with each other with the noise of the city as a backdrop. According to Jeff Speck in Walkable City, a general theory of walkability explains how a walk has to satisfy four main conditions in order to be favored. Therefore, the walk must be useful, safe, comfortable, and interesting. Each of these qualities are essential and none alone is sufficient. A useful walk means that most aspects of daily life are located close at hand and organized in a way that walking serves them well. Safe walks means that the street has been designed to give pedestrians a fighting chance against being hit by automobiles. They must not only be safe, but feel safe too, which is tougher to satisfy. A comfortable walk means that building and landscapes shape urban streets into outdoor rooms. In contrast to wide open spaces which usually fail to attract pedestrians, transform an underutilized public right of way into a safe, pleasant, and vibrant public space for pedestrians and cyclists alike. An interesting walk means that the sidewalks are lined with unique buildings with friendly faces and that signs of humanity around. On April 21, 1990, Salvador started with murals and sculptures in the street Calle Ondeamo near University of Havana. For sculptures, he used scraped objects like bathtubs, hand pumps, pinwheels, etc. And for the murals, he used different kinds of available paint, including car enamel. Even though the first 4 years became difficult, he was inspired by local inhabitants and visitors to continue his work. And little by little, the street was transformed from a slum area to an enthusiastic Afro-Cuban center. Today, there are workshops for young Cuban children to learn painting. Every Sunday, there are rumba performances, and every Friday, Cuban music is in the streets. Muraleando, another grassroots community project, has used art to transform a blighted neighborhood on the outskirts of Havana. In 2001, local artists began teaching kids how to paint murals. Before long, murals began appearing along the main streets. Sculptors added their touch, creating art out of trash they scavenged from the piles of junk thrown throughout the neighborhood. Today, the garbage is gone and apathy has been replaced by a tight-knit community that hosts Block Party every 6 weeks, providing a stage for local artists, poets, singers, and musicians. As a young man, Jose Foster has studied the work of Picasso, Gaudi, and other contemporary artists in Europe. Upon returning to Cuba, he bought a small wooden house on the outskirts of Havana to use as his studio and began transforming it into one colossal work of art. Today, every inch of the walls, columns, benches, and even the roofs within the compound are covered in mosaic scenes that often depict the peasant life he knew as a child. When Foster ran out of space inside the compound, he moved into the neighborhood, gradually winning permission to decorate the homes of more than 80 of his neighbors with his unique brand of Cuban art. In the early years, some accused him of creating a monument to himself, but Foster is quick to point out that he had used money from the sale of his paintings and sculptures to turn what was an impoverished fishing village into an international art destination. These days, there is little grumbling from residents who have a newfound pride within their community.
Music, it truly brings people together. It allows us as people to express ourselves through lyrics to songs or through dance moves. The island of Cuba has been influential in the development of multiple music styles in the 19th and 20th century. Cabildos preserved African cultural traditions even after the emancipation in 1886, and it forced them to unite with the Roman Catholic Church. Cuban music has its principal roots in Spain and West Africa, but over time has been influenced by diverse genres from different countries. Cuban music has also been influential in other countries, contributing not only to the development of jazz and salsa, but also to Argentinian tango, Ghanaian high life, West African Afrobeat, and Spanish Nuevo Flamenco. Overall, Havana is a wonderful city and is considered one of the most culturally rich urban centers in the world. For our project, we wanted to highlight all of the things that make Havana what it is: the people, the community, and art and music. Throughout our video, we captured the history of its people through social identity. We captured the history of art and its impact on community development. Lastly, we captured the history of Cuban music. All these aspects are important because they are all what make Cuba so culturally rich. As citizens of the U.S., we should embrace the cultures within the U.S. to create better communities that will contribute to the overall social life of the citizens of the U.S.